In the 17th century, when Russia is fragmented and close to being completely subdued by a confederation of Mongols and Tatars. However, Yevpatyi Kalibrat, a young warrior from the city of Ryazan, raises his people in arms against the invaders. In 1123, shortly after the Battle of Kalka River between the Mongols and several Russian principalities, a group of Russian men travel through the forest to hunt. Two of them have brought their children, Nastia, a girl who likes to play the flute, and Kalibrat, a boy who dreams of becoming a warrior and guard of the prince. Unfortunately, they are suddenly ambushed by a group of Mongolian soldiers, led by Commander Kostobrul. After losing her flute, Nastia takes a horse to the city to ask for help while Kalibrat stays behind, trying to fight too. All the Russian men die and Kalibrat grabs two swords to defend himself, but before he can do anything, Kostobrul throws balls at his neck and knocks out. 14 years later, an adult Kalibrat wakes up tied to a bed with no memories and gets scared. An older Nastia is used to this reaction and runs to her side to explain everything to him. The Mongols had given him up for dead, so Kalibrat survived. He is now a foreman of the prince's guard, is married to Nastia, and they have had 2 children together. Hearing these words and walking around the house helps Kalibrat remember, but he doesn't even get to breakfast before one of his soldiers, Karkin, comes to pick him up to go to the city walls. When they get there, Prince Yuri of Ryazan asks Kalibrat for advice on what to do with the men on horseback who are bringing the city closer. Since they still can't see their flags, Kalibrat tells them to wait before attack, and this turns out to be the smartest thing to do. It's not the Mongols, it's another prince and his men who have come for the baptism of Yuri's grandson. Later, Kalibrat is in charge of training the soldiers. Yuri's son Fedor arrives late because he was busy with preparations for the baptism of his son, of whom Kalibrat will be the godfather. Kalibrat asks him to prove his skills and Fedor gladly accepts the challenge, but only ends up embarrassing himself and leaving. After training is over, Kalibrat returns home with gifts for his family, a small hedgehog for his children and a new flute that he carved himself for his wife. Nastia loves it and keeps it in a box to keep it safe, but inside that box, Kalibrat finds dozens of flutes because he carves one every day and continues forgetting about them. Later, the baptism ceremony is interrupted by a citizen who announces that the Mongols are coming. Everyone runs to hide, but Kalibrat stays with the baby until the priest finishes blessing. After Yuri and his men notice the large number of soldiers, the Mongols give orders to close the doors and not let anyone out until decide what to do. The prince holds a meeting to discuss the problem. Fedor believes that their Russian warriors are better, so they could defeat the Mongols even when they are outnumbered, while other advisors think they should pay tribute. This would leave the city poor, but at least they would survive. Yuri decides to buy time, to see if they can ask for help from neighboring cities, so he wants Fedor to take the best guards and go to negotiate with the Mongols. Meanwhile, Kalibrat he leaves the meeting in the middle of it to check on the state of the city, where everyone panics and runs for shelter. He comes across a healer named Zakar who begs Kalibrat to let him go out. Change of potions, but Kalibrat reminds him that the city is surrounded and there is no escape. He then returns home only to find Yuri there with an order. Kalibrat he must gather his men and go with Fedor to see the Mongols. Kalibrat doesn't think it's a good idea because of his memory problems, and Nastia agrees with him, breaking down in tears and begging the prince to reconsider. However, Kalibrat is the man Yuri trusts the most, so he doesn't change his mind. Pinyin. The soldiers gather near the gates to set off. Karkin will also go, and since they will need a translator, Kalibrat chooses Zakar to do it. Come too because he understands the language of the Mongolians. Once your car is laden with riches, the group takes off and travels to the Mongol camp, where they are led to the tent of their leader Bata Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan. Their offerings are well received, so they invite them to sit down and share some drinks, and take advantage of the opportunity to ask the Mongols what they want. Bata Khan says he doesn't want anything and that the Russians came uninvited, but he feels curiosity about its people, so he will have Ryazan as his first Russian city. Everything a man who kneels before Bata Khan will be well fed, but Fedor responds saying that he wants to see Bata Khan kneel in his place. This is taken as an insult, so Kalibrat, who has been looking at the large map of Batu, stands up and comes to Fedor's defense, announcing that his city will only be taken on his own. Corpses. Bata Khan claims that he will never kneel before anyone, but he respects the insides of Kalibrat, so he gives him a talisman with a transit card. This card allows a person to walk through enemy territory without being attacked or harassed. Then Bata Khan invites them to watch a little show while they enjoy their drinks. This is a trick to distract the Russians so that the Mongols can lay a trap for them. Ambush, but the plan does not work. The table is occupied by Russian slaves and they see approaching the Mongols, so they warn their compatriots just in time. A fight ensues and Kalibrat throws everyone out of the tent, including the slaves, and they push their way through a group of soldiers to steal some horses and run towards the forest. forest. Unfortunately, Fedor is hit by an arrow, so he decides to stay behind to buy some time for his friends and is killed by Kostobrul. Batakhan does not. He thinks it's worth chasing them and orders the horde to prepare for an attack. A few hours later, Kalibrat's group has trouble crossing the forest due to an extreme snowstorm. Suddenly, a giant bear approaches them, but the animal does not attack because it is under the control of his Russian compatriot Nestor. This man takes them to a huge cave so that they can rest until the storm passes, but Kalibrat refuses to sleep and he asks Nestor for a potion that can keep him awake for the sake of his memories. However, Nestor refuses to prepare such a thing because he thinks that waking up every tomorrow without memories is a blessing that allows you to start your life again. Kalibrat tries his best to stay awake in front of the fire and realizes who still remembers the map he saw in the store, so he writes it down before forget it. Once the weather calms down, the group leaves, leaving Nestor in his cave. However, when they return to Ryazan, it is already too late. The Mongols have already destroyed the city. Most of the buildings were hit by catapults. The main bell fell from its rope. Yuri was killed by the archers. Fedor's wife decided to jump with the baby before being caught, and Nastia with the children. He stayed in the house until it collapsed. After finding the flute that he carved among the ruins of his house, Kalibrat gathers his men and together they return, lift the bell to ring it, and get the survivors out of their hiding places. There are not many people left and several of these survivors are children. Suddenly, someone announces that the Mongols are coming to finish them off, so Kalibrat quickly comes up with a plan. While everyone hides, he stays under the bell and pretends let the Mongols capture him, but as soon as they get close, Kalibrat attacks. His dual wielding of two swords in a circular motion is extremely effective and kills many enemies in seconds. And once Kalibrat has reduced their numbers, his men come out and help him finish them off. Now that the fight has finished, Kalibrat comes up with a plan. Send 3 messengers to warn the neighboring cities and ask them for help, and the children will be sent to hide in Nestor's cave. Kalibrat and the soldiers will try turn the horde around and keep them distracted. They just need to find a way to do it. Fortunately, Zakar has an idea. He prepares a special potion that they pour into the water that the Mongols drink, making them all sick. To ensure that receive the message, Kalibrat tears off part of the transit chart and ties it to an arrow who shoots at the camp so that Kostobrul can find her. The commander sends some soldiers after Kalibrat's group to take revenge for the water, but it's all a trap. Russian soldiers are waiting for them and easily kill them with their arrows. Once they are safe, Kalibrat faints and cannot stand. I stay awake longer after 3 days without sleep. While the group sets up camp, Lada ties Kalibrat to a tree and looks after him, while praying to the gods for him to fall in love with her. When night falls, Lada wakes Kalibrat up so he can get something to eat. However, she unties him before finish reciting all the important facts for him to remember, so Kalibrat escapes and attacks his friends. It takes many men to hold him down, and it is thanks to Karkin's words that Kalibrat regains consciousness. Kalibrat then apologizes to his fellow soldiers and comforts Lada, who is crying. Meanwhile, 2 messengers leave the areas healthy and safe and reach the neighboring cities, but when they speak with the princes, they refuse to help and prefer to stay behind and protect their homes. The 3rd messenger is wounded and faints on the horse, so the animal gets lost and takes the wrong path. The next night, Kalibrat and his men they sneak into the Mongolian camp wearing costumes and face paint to make them believe they are spirits. Some soldiers flee and the Russians kill those who do not, and then use catapults to attack the Mongols with their own weapons. Before leaving, Kalibrat leaves another arrow with a piece of the letter so that Kostobrul knows who did this. As revenge, the Mongols capture the lost messenger to torture him. Kalibrat and his men hide in the forest and go to sleep early, confident that they will receive help in the morning. Lada tries to lay down next to Kalibrat, not knowing that he is awake, so when he turns to look at her, she thinks he is waking up and begins to recite the memories. This includes pretending to be Nastia, but Kalibrat exposes her lie before to hold her and remind her that she is all that is left of home. When morning comes, Kalibrat goes into the forest to check out some strange noises. Without realizing, he notices that Lada is following him. Thus, he finds the corpse of the 3rd messenger, which had been left there as a trap. Now Kalibrat finds himself surrounded by Mongols. While Lada runs from returning to camp to ask for help, Kostobrul watches in amazement as Kalibrat he fights alone against all the soldiers as a snowstorm begins to blow around you. The commander tries to stop him with his balls like he did years ago, but this time Kalibrat stops them with his sword. As the storm worsens, Nestor and the bear kill a group of Mongols and scare away the survivors. When the soldiers return to their camp, telling terrifying stories of what they have just experienced. See, Kostobrul had not believed in the trick of the spirits, but now that he has seen Kalibrat command a storm and a bear, he is starting to believe too. Batukin is disappointed with his men for believing such things and orders his army to to turn back, determined to find a way to prove that there is nothing magical about this war. Back with the Russians, Nestor frees the bear and joins Kalibrat's army. He also brought with him some men from nearby villages. The group celebrates when Karkin returns with good news. Just as planned, the Mongols they are turning around and following them instead of going behind the other cities. There is only one problem left: the sled full of children that Nestor looked after in his cave. Following the idea of taking out, Kalibrat decides that the group will stay behind and keep the line while Karkin takes Lada and the children to the river. There they can set up the sail on the sleigh and travel faster than any horse. In this way, the survivors will be able to rebuild a new Ryazan in the future. After the sleigh leaves, the men begin to work on various traps and they wait on the top of a hill for the Mongols to arrive. When Batukin he finally arrives there, bringing with him a huge army and wasting no time in sending some men after the Russians. This first attack fails because the soldiers fall into the traps and the archers, which makes it difficult for the Mongols to climb the hill. Meanwhile, Karkin finds the way blocked, so he frees the horse and asks Lada and the children to help him push the sled. The battle on the hill continues. The Mongols also fire their arrows, and after defeating some Russians, they finally climb up and begin to fight Kalibrat's men hand to hand. Nestor and Zahar are killed as Kostobrul comes for their leader, but Kalibrat defeats him easily with a clean cut of their two swords. However, the Mongols still they are outnumbered, so the Russian soldiers slowly fall one by one, but at least they protect the top of the hill long enough for Karkin to reach the river. However, he encounters a small problem. The knot around the sail is frozen and have no fire. Lada makes the children breathe on the frost, which releases the rope and allows them to let go of the sail, so they can now escape with security. With only a few men remaining, Kalibrat defeats the remaining Mongols at the top of the hill and raises his flag. Batakan feels ridiculed and sends a messenger to find out what the Russians want, but Kalibrat returns the same words that received a few days ago. They don't want anything and the Mongols came here without being guests. As Batakan, furious, orders his men to fire the catapults, Kalibrat he notices the sled sailing towards the river and celebrates that the survivors have managed to escape just before a rock knocks him out. When he wakes up seconds later, Kalibrat has all his memories but finds all his men dead. As last honorable move, he goes down the hill, protecting himself from any attack showing the talisman. Kalibrat falls to the ground and tells Batakan that one day his people will take revenge. Then he drops the talisman in the snow and asks the Mongol leader to return it. Batakan does as he is asked and Kalibrat smiles, noting that he made Batakan kneel before him before he died. Batakan is impressed by Kalibrat's heroism and says that this would be the warrior he would trust the most if he were one of his own. He then asks his men to give him a hero's burial. 5 years later, Karkin is the leader of the Novgorod Vladimir army. He inspires his men by reminding them Kalibrat's sacrifice and noble struggle before leading them to what would become known as the Battle on the Ice.